How did they come up with this idea? Did they all meet in a boardroom one day and say, well, we like Pinocchio and we like From Software, specifically Bloodborne and Sekiro, so how about we just put them together? And that's how we end up with Liza P. And that's it. I definitely know how game development works. So then I see the first trailer and all I can think to myself is that this looks very goofy. I mean, look at this trailer and say that it isn't. I bet you can't. Then 2 years later, the demo comes out, and okay, I can see where you're coming from, NeoWiz and Round 8. You might have only made this game, which I've never heard of, but I have faith that this will be a good game. Then the game comes out, and wow, I didn't expect this game to be anywhere near my Game of the Year list. But move over Baldur's Gate 3 and Tears of the Kingdom, Pinocchio is coming through. Now let's talk about the story. How much of the original story by Carlos Collodi do you actually know? If you answered absolutely nothing, then you're probably born after the 90s. If you know everything front to back, then you're probably 80 plus. Liza P takes the characters of the original story and spins it in an interesting way. There's a puppet frenzy, causing the puppets to revolt against humans. This causes a group of people called the Alchemists to try to find a cure, and it, needless to say, isn't going very well. We see and hear from many different people throughout the game about how these different aspects have affected them, mostly in horrible, depressing ways. If you thought this would be a happy-go-lucky game compared to your average From Software story like, oh, Pinocchio's going around lying and his nose is growing, well, you'll be in for a rude awakening very quickly. Not to say that there isn't any levity, because there definitely is. You were sent by your father, Geppetto, to deal with these issues in a very checklist type way, where you finish one thing and move on to the next, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next, and so on. That's really all I want to say without spoiling any more of it. Liza P's story is much more straightforward compared to the From Software style of storytelling. Long gone are the days of reading item descriptions, although there is plenty of info to learn that way if you want. If you dislike From Software's type of storytelling, then Liza P will most likely be up your alley. And if you have read the book, then you'll definitely see the similarities and the twists that they place on certain aspects. Not many adaptations have I actually went back to inform myself on the source material, but I was genuinely interested to see how they had changed things. In terms of gameplay, let's get to the minor complaints first. The pacing of some areas is a little all over the place. The level design itself is great. It really feels like they studied From Software's level design down to the T, but some areas could have gone on a little longer, feel a little short, while some areas go on for a little bit too long, mostly the final one. I remember Elden Ring getting some flack for having 4 bosses in a row at the very end, but I think I would have preferred something like that here, especially considering the long-ass elevator leading up to one of the final bosses. It really sets the stage for a grand finale that just feels postponed because after the fight, you have to do a little bit more climbing. The game took about 35 hours to beat, and considering the current climate of games and how bloated they can get, I'd say that's just perfect. The fact that things like rolling from the ground and double rolling are locked behind upgrades sucks because of how used to having these abilities are in other Souls games. And it seems like the developers know about it considering the patch that's coming out this month if this video gets done in November. There's only 3 different damage stats, motivity, technique, and advance, which leads to less build variety compared to other Souls-likes that usually have around 5. That's really the only true complaints I have. There are some few minor ones, like some questionable hitboxes and a tight parry window, coming from someone that puts Sekiro close to the top of their personal list of Souls games. I don't see this as a problem, but I can definitely see how somebody could bounce off of this pretty easily, considering how tight the windows can be for some attacks. Now, one of the big questions, is this game hard? Yes, it is. I'm not surprised a lot of people bounced off of it as hard as they did. I would say it's on the same level as something like Bloodborne in terms of its difficulty. It's a game that demands complete awareness, and if you're willing to throw yourself into a grinder continuously to learn every single move, then it's definitely for you. In terms of leveling, it's pretty standard fare. Along with those damage stats, there is also vitality, vigor, and capacity. Can you guess what they do? health and guard regain, stamina, and weight limit, respectively, in case you didn't. Combat has a very distinct flow compared to other Souls-likes. It's a constant back and forth between perfect guards, dodges, and attacking. While the Bloodborne influence is extremely obvious, I'd say it's closer to a Dark Souls 3 in terms of speed most of the time. I'd say the most contentious part of combat is the fury attacks that require a perfect guard or moving completely out of the way, which is easier said than done. Yeah, most of the time there's usually never a difference between normal and fury attacks, other than that they're red and can't be dodged. I mean, you can look at my beloved green swamp monster. It has a slam move that goes 3 times, and the last one is a fury attack, but it's just like the others. You can get an amulet, which are like rings, that allow you to dodge them, but not like you'd be able to wear it considering the weight. So while I don't personally mind them, fury attacks could use a little more pizzazz, if you will, to differentiate them. The bread and butter of this game's build variety is the assembly of weapons, where you can take the blade of any basic weapon and match it with any handle of another basic weapon. The handle determines the move set and the scaling, while the blade changes the damage and one of the Fable Arts. Fable Arts are special moves that you can fill up by attacking enemies and getting perfect guards. And my god, whatever you do, don't sleep on some of these Fable Arts.
Oh no!
They are extremely powerful and can change fights in an instance, and thanks to consumables you can pretty much spam them if you want. That's also something that can kick some serious ass. I'm being serious, by the way. Be ready to nuke some bosses with your saw blades and electric canisters. You're having trouble getting that charge attack to stagger an enemy? Well, just throw one of your shot puts and watch them fall like nothing. There's 2 last big things that are part of your arsenal, and that is your Legion Arm and the P organ. The Legion Arm acts as a secondary way to deal damage or for some other utility. Whether it's shooting out electricity, flame, or acid, or maybe you take the Aegis for a defensive shield, or the Falcon Eye, which just gives you a gun. All of them have their uses. The P organ lets you apply specific perks to your build. It can be anything from increasing your number of heals to reducing the prices of items. Whenever you fill out a circle, you get that skill that's in the middle. It's pretty unique for a Souls-like, and it lets you diversify even more. Bosses are the heart and soul of these games, and Lies of P does not disappoint in that department. Each one is distinct, and when there is some reusage of bosses, it's usually with some sort of gimmick that makes it unique from the first time you fight him. I was stopped in my tracks for most of these bosses, and I'd say I'm pretty decent at these kinds of games. My personal favorite is the aforementioned Swamp Monster. On my first playthrough, I hated this guy. The erratic movements of his second phase gave me shit for sure, but I truly had to learn every little tell to win, and it's something that I haven't had to feel in a really long time. But you know, it felt so rewarding to finally defeat him, and it's that feeling that I'll be happy to feel in the future for sure. So why is Lies of P my game of the year? I think it comes down to the clear passion that's being shown by the developers at Round 8 and NeoWiz and bringing their goofy Pinocchio Souls-like to life. And it's very clear that the developers there have a clear passion for the source material, and the fact that they were able to bring it forth and combine it with these Souls-like elements to come out with a completely great package on their first attempt, I'll add, is quite outstanding, really, and that's why it's my game of the year personally.